Welcome to People Doing Good for Others, where we praise and celebrate and honor and hold in the light those who are truly making significant contributions in our communities. I'm Gary York, and I'm grateful to be here today. I want to thank Wilkes Communications and River Street Productions, 100.9 WIFM for this honor. And my special guest today is Dr. Don Martin. He lives in Tobaccoville. He's a Forsyth County Commissioner. He's a former superintendent for 19 years of the Forsyth County Schools. He's significantly involved in the PhD program in education and leadership at High Point University. And I met him 3 years ago, and I'm grateful to have the relationship, and he's a great teacher and counselor, and I'm glad he's here today. Good morning, my friend.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. You're a career educator, that special calling, if you will, and kind of how'd you get started?
Well, to tell you the truth, it was a little bit random how I got started, but then I think the calling was loud at that point. But I was actually a student in college, and I was really trying to decide what I wanted to do. I was not an education major, and I actually saw literally a brochure on a bulletin board, and it started off with "We'll find you a job," which was attractive. I was a senior, and this job was it was called Master of Arts in Teaching degree. And I was at Duke University, they offered it, and they actually found a placement for you to teach. So you would go to graduate school in the summer, you would go teach a year, come back for graduate school, you'd take some courses during the year, and you'd finish your master's degree in 2 summers in a year. And there were just school districts that cooperated with them, and North Wilkesboro City Schools was one of the cooperating school districts. This was back in 73. 73, and so literally I came out to Wilkes Central High School. The folks around here with the old Wilkes Central High School, which I think later became a junior high when the new high school was built. In fact, the bond issue to approve that new high school was approved right before I left, so to give you an idea. But in any case, 4 years I taught math and physics at Wilkes Central High School, finished up my program in the Master of Arts in Teaching degree, and really, kind of fell in love with education and teaching. And in fact, a phrase that I ran into a guy one time, and he said, the most important thing about education, he said, it's all about, it is the basis and the preservation of our democracy. You teach to preserve our democracy. Yeah. And that's a bigger and greater calling than many other things. So that kind of got me started.
Dr. Don Martin, then where? You left here?
I left here. From here, I actually went to graduate school and wanted to be an administrator. And it's a way long story, but I ended up at the University of Kentucky and finished. I worked there 3 years, finished my EDD, my doctorate in educational administration is what it was called then. They didn't call it leadership. Educational administration, and I worked for the State Department in education in Kentucky for a year. And literally my first kind of real job was the superintendent of the smallest school district in Kentucky. And by smallest, it had 1 square mile, it had 1 school, K through 8, and it had 180 students, basically the 4 years, it kind of plus or minus during the 3 years, I was there 3 years. And it still exists here.
Does it really?
2018, it still exists. And the high school kids go to a neighboring district, and the school district pays tuition for them to go. So
you're calling to be in the leadership role, be a superintendent. Do you remember that was early on?
Well, yeah. In fact, the high school principal here at Wilkes Central High School, his name was Carl Banks, Dr. Carl Banks. He actually came from Kentucky. That was kind of the connection to Kentucky. Was here as the principal, and really my conversations with him when I was a teacher led me to want to be a principal, number one, and to be in school administration.
How did we get to Forsyth County?
Well, I went in Kentucky. I was in 2 districts, superintendent there for 9 years in 2 districts, and then I was looking around for a job, and I saw that Rowan County and Salisbury City were getting ready to merge. This was the advertisement was in 88, and the merger was going to take place in 89. I applied for that job, and I was hired as the merger for the superintendent to bring the two together. So I was the Rowan Salisbury Schools first superintendent of schools, which you might imagine brought with it a little, they probably wanted an outside person that didn't have allegiances to Rowan County or allegiances to Salisbury City. And so I was there 5 years, and we went through everything from redistricting all the students, because you combine the two districts, which is not without controversy and not without unhappy people. And so I learned a few things during that time, needless to say.
But be a good listener.
Absolutely. Listening is absolutely central to actually the work of a school superintendent and a school leader. You better be a good listener. But it was great. I think I learned a lot, and certainly tried to give back as well as I could. And I think the school district is flourishing now as Rowan Salisbury Schools. And from there, actually, Winston-Salem Forsyth County opened up. And I said, well, maybe another new challenge, ready to move to a new one. And that one, I was there 19 years. So I spent a lot of years as a superintendent of schools in 4 very different school districts.
How big is Forsyth County?
When I retired, it was about 53,500, and it's grown a little. It's about 54,500 now, but it's grown slowly. I retired in 2013, but we went through a period of time we were growing about 500 to 600 kids a year. Pretty regularly. So that's the equivalent of an elementary school a year. We were growing. But actually population trends are leveling a little bit. Kindergarten classes getting a little smaller. And then we now have, they're not only charter schools, but they're also, voucher schools, and that's impacting different districts in different ways. But one of the things Forsyth measured we started a choice plan. We measured how many students actually, we call it market share, how many of the Forsyth County eligible students went to the Winston-Salem Forsyth County schools. And when we started measuring that, we compared ourselves to the 4 other kind of urban districts, the 5, and we were like the 4th, but now it's the best now. It has the highest market share of Charlotte.
Public school.
Yeah, of the 5 urban districts,
right, okay.
Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Wake County Schools, Durham, and Guilford.
Yeah.
And when we started, Guilford was by far the first, and now Winston-Salem's the first, ahead of all those others.
Wow.
Over that time. And I think it's a credit to we began a choice plan in 1996, and where you had public school choice, where you had zones and people could go to different schools if they chose to. Had similar kind of issues at the middle school, and the high school had an open enrollment policy for available seats beyond, and actually it balanced. It wasn't perfect, but it was geared to serve parents and what they wanted. And I think that is still the case, and I think a lot of parents stay with that because they appreciate that opportunity.
Dr. Don Martin is my featured guest today, and I learned so much just being in your presence. When you played a key role at High Point in some leadership and education programs, what are the keys, if you had 3 things maybe to say about training folks to be great leaders in communities and education, what are the things you say now, what do you do?
Well, number one, you have to understand what the work is really like. I mean, theory is, and by the way, there is a body of work over the last 100 years of leadership theory, and that is important to understand. But if you only know the theory, you have to also understand how it's applied in real settings, and you have to understand the dynamics that make sort of the real theory, have to be adjusted. And particularly some of those dynamics in school settings. Literally, there is a political arena, and I don't mean a political arena in some kind of negative connotation. I mean,
the reality.
The reality is that every school district in this country is governed by a school board.
Yes.
Most are elected, some are appointed, and in North Carolina, there's another layer because you interface with county commissioners to get local money. That's where your local, you don't levy taxes here as a school district. You get your local money from county commissioners. So. You have to understand that reality, and you have to understand the reality of you're really balancing, kind of individuals and personal and employee interests. You're balancing parent, certainly, their desires, their requirements, their children, and it is our future. So that preparing democracy. So all that has to fit in some kind of context of dollars and cents and priorities and issues, and you're trying to serve a community. So it's an interesting mix that, quite frankly, theory alone doesn't prepare you for. And I think the High Point program really tried to bring in the practitioner side on top of the theory, and research to help make decisions. In other words, applied research that helps your school district become better, and not just a dissertation that's going to sit on the wall, say, on the shelf somewhere.
Yeah. So working with school boards that change, and personalities that come and go, and leading folks to be one, right, together.
Exactly, trying to work together. And I think the comment you made earlier about in Rowan Salisbury, listening to people. But listening to issue, one of the most important skills I think any leader in any area has. And there are different kinds of listening. I mean, a typical listening is you hear, and you're already thinking of the answer and thinking typically of a reason to say no. Because usually the question starts out with something that doesn't sound exactly right. And part of that listening, you have to sort of suspend that judgment.
Suspend judgment.
And then you have to sit, and part of the thinking, and I've talked about this in class with our students, is to think about, well, how could this work? Instead of looking for reasons to say no, why it could not work, what are the things that would make that work, that idea? I mean, because somebody's bringing something to you that is very important to them, or they wouldn't be there.
It could be great.
Right, and it could be. So you have to start thinking, well, how could you make that work? And I thought through a couple examples that my inclination was no, and to not do that. And I had to just say, think about how this could work and be important and be fair, because a big part of being a superintendent, you can't say, well, yeah, this idea is great, so that just ignores everything else. You have to balance that so you're not doing something for someone or some group. It has to be something you do for anybody. And so how do you make that fair? And so that issue is very important. And I think there's a listening that's empathetic. Particularly a parent comes in with maybe a special needs child with a lot of issues they've dealt with, and you got to listen and say, if I were sitting in their shoes with this situation, how would the questions I'd be asking, and does this resonate, emotionally and empathetically? And that's an important, and there's kind of another kind that and I think this happens more because this is a family level, on family levels and with spouses, you almost develop a listening where you almost don't even have to speak. You almost, it's somewhat spiritual in a way, but it's a way that the way that over time you sort of know how people think, and you have that vibe, that's a very different listener. In fact, I had somebody explain it's a way a really excellent professional basketball team, for example, they know where their other players are going to be. I mean, they're throwing a ball where they just know they're going to be there because their synergy, and if they're listening and they're understanding, they know how they all work together. And that is sort of the ultimate that's that listening, kind of the ultimate thing to do.
And being out on the street, being on campuses and visiting the schools. Yesterday I was at Wilkes Central interviewing a guest to be a few months from now, and I looked up and there's Mark Burt. There's our superintendent right there in the middle of the lunchroom, and that matters, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and I've been fortunate to get to know Mark for a long time, and from his days back at Elkin High School, Elkin City Schools High School, and I think he's been a great match here. And I remember I was at High Point when he was named superintendent, and I remember sending him an email and said,
"Did you really?"
Yeah, I sent him an email because I said, part of our job at High Point is to be a service to school districts, and you're brand new, and if you want to, bounce things off, we're not selling anything, not charging anything, but if you want, we'd be glad to help in any way that I can or that High Point can, and we had some students from Wilkes that would come, to High Point. But basically, it was a way to reach out to say that when you're transitioning as a brand new superintendent and you've been in the district, people think of you now differently, and so a lot of relationships and issues change. And he has been a really great leader.
Tremendous asset.
A great leader here.
We're a great leader. You've transitioned into being a county commissioner.
Yes.
And you live in Tobaccoville.
Yes.
Tell us about, and you're going to be running the second term unopposed, and I think that's a tremendous tribute to you. Your aspirations or your dreams as entering that political arena?
Well, one aspiration is not necessarily just to keep being a politician. I mean, I'm not looking at another. Sure. What's next? And I'm
going to Raleigh.
Right, not looking at that, and really, it is a local issue. It's how to. I mean, I've been in Forsyth County 25 years basically. It's how to make it better, and I know when I ran, schools are important. Schools are important to me, and county commissioners have a role in schools. So that was a very strong attraction. Clearly, economic development is an issue. Everybody wants to try to their cities and their counties to grow properly, develop your tax base. If you want to keep taxes low, instead of just reducing taxes, you need to have some more people paying taxes, and that sort of helps that part. And I think the other part is just the quality of life. I mean, now you're into arenas that go beyond education, but basically, you know, relationships, a lot of partnerships, whether it's healthcare issues, how do you deal with crime, how do you deal with poverty, social services, health departments. Counties deal with a lot of supporting services and infrastructure. And I've had a lot of experience in some of those areas, and it's kind of an extension to the kind of work I did when I was superintendent, actually.
Dr. Don Martin, do you have an area that kind of fits you better, that you have a significant, you told me school construction was one of them.
Well, yeah, it is, but I think probably over the years, the best thing I learned how to do, and this is one of the things I try to talk to students about, is you got to learn how to ask good questions. And asking good questions is a part of, you got to know a little bit about stuff, but even if you don't know, you have to ask good questions to kind of probe. So it's kind of like a doctor with a patient, ask a lot of questions to rule out things. You got to ask a lot of questions to both understand it, as well as to get at a lot of times, what is the real cost here? What do you really, because there's a lot of, government should be run as cheaply as possible to provide maximum services.
Right.
It is taxpayer, it's somebody else's money that you're spending, it's not your money. And I think, it's very important to always remember who you're serving. I've served parents in the community, but I've got to serve taxpayers, which is a very, very broad, group. And that is important, so you got to ask good questions. But yes, school construction is something I do. I just had the opportunity in my career to be a part of building a lot of buildings and paying for them. Yeah. And I we're not building Taj Mahals, but we're building functional buildings that are attractive, that serve students. But we're not building monuments just to get architectural prizes. We're out here to build very practical, but yet useful, attractive buildings. So yeah, that's an area certainly, and just in general, contracting, purchasing, and those kind of things, and try to operate more efficiently. And I certainly bring some of those questions.
And how big is your board?
We have 7 commissioners, county commissioners.
And the budget?
Budget's about 450, 60 million, somewhere in there, about $500 million a year. So, but a big chunk of that, about 120, goes to schools.
How many times a week will you be on the official something?
We not only do we meet every week. This is I guess Wednesday of this week, and I've had things Monday and Tuesday. So sometimes it's something every day, but then sometimes it's not. I mean, it is a part-time kind of issue, but you'll be talking to different kinds of groups and people about issues sometimes every day. And email is not as much as a superintendent by any means, but there's a fair amount of email inquiry too.
Yeah. Dr. Martin, when today you're in a consultancy endeavor and a unit called Risa.
Yes.
A lot of us really don't understand, what is a Risa?
Well, many years ago, and I will not give the whole long history, but many years ago, the Department of Public Instruction in North Carolina said in order to deliver our services, because they have a service mission, the school districts, to help them, and they created 8 regional areas to provide more local service areas. And they called them Regional Education Support Agencies, RESA, RESAs. And they have geographical taglines, so the Northwest Risa is this one, and it has, and in fact it's been around for a long, in fact it's been here in Wilkesboro for a long, long time. And it's at the Holiday Inn Express. Office has been there for many years, and the director, Dr. Joe Sinclair, he's been there 19 years, and they have a curriculum person been there 19 years. But it has shrunk over the years as the Department of Public Instruction began to downsize. They basically quit paying for positions, and they gave school districts money for you to pay dues if you wanted to. And then there were no requirements on any of that money. Basically, the Risas exist because school districts buy services from them. And those services are typically teacher training. Teacher training. And for administrators, there's a superintendent's council and a principal's council. And that's where you create a lot of networking opportunities for superintendents and principals and curriculum leaders. So with Joe, Dr. Sinclair retiring, and Dee Hamlin, who's been there 19 years, there will be no full-time staff at this moment. There's one full-time administrative assistant who is literally taking care of everything. And now it's a 501c3, used to be affiliated with Wilkes County Schools. Now it's all standalone on its own. So,
it's a nonprofit.
Yeah, absolutely. And school districts pay dues to be a member, to get services. So we have 11 school districts, range kind of Burt County is the furthest to the west, Allegheny and Ash up and through the north, and now comes back to Wilkes and picks up Catawba in the middle, and Caldwell and Alexander, and the city districts in there too, Newton, Conover, Hickory, Elkin's a piece of that. So it's 11 school districts and the School for the Deaf. The North Carolina School for the Deaf is also in Morganton as a member. So those 12 entities pay dues to basically support that operation. And as they were beginning to, I actually got a call from the governing group, superintendent's group, and said, things are starting to change. Would you kind of be willing to work with us this semester to plan for what's next? So it's really a study of what's next. And so I've literally visited members. I have one left, and I'm going to prepare a report this month and here's sort of recommendations of how you might be in the future. Because of the economy of dollars and support, probably a lot of part-time people, to actually manage it. And we'll have a full-time person to keep the things going, and probably reduce the kind of the overhead, if you will, and provide more services out in school districts. So staff development for teachers is very difficult when you have to employ a substitute at the school district. They have to travel, and the substitute, is never, their work, the teacher's work is never replicated. I mean, the substitute does the best they can, but it's not what the teacher's doing.
Yeah.
So so how do you get teachers trained in a way that works better? And so we're looking at maybe bringing training more to school districts. So it's not, you kind of eliminate some of that travel.
Give us some idea about training a teacher, Dr. Martin. Give me, just say a course on, what would it be?
Well, in fact, I just left a meeting with the curriculum leaders, and they had two guests there today. One is actually a group sponsored by the Western Council of Governments, Western Piedmont Council of Governments, and it's called STEM West. And STEM is science, technology, engineering, math. And there another one, and there's in the science arena, is basically called the North Carolina Science House, and that's headquartered at North Carolina State, and they have regional offices across. One is in Lenoir, in our region. So the STEM West person from the Western Council of Government support, and the North Carolina, the Science House at Lenoir, they were there talking about the kind of training they do. And a lot of what they do is bring industry. It goes up to beyond high school, certainly. They're bringing, applications of science and technology out in the real world to teachers and students so they see what's going on. And they do a lot of different, they do hands-on science. I mean, I heard that groups that go out and look at streams and mill ponds and track their health over time and discover a lot of things. So they do a lot of work with kids. So they deliver programs, some of which are grant funded, some of which the district has to pay some money for. But it's providing, again, training to help kids actually, their sort of light bulbs come on about science and technology in its application, not only in their everyday life, but the applications there's real work out there and real careers in science, technology, engineering, math, and particularly for girls. Girls many times do not see themselves in that role, and they have the two ladies I heard today have programs that are really designed for girls, so they begin to understand, man, science is fun for girls. This is not a thing that's dominated by males, kind of issue. So it's trying to overcome some of those kind of, gender stereotypes and who is a scientist. I mean, I think that's working. I mean, all you got to do is go to the hospital and look at the medical doctors.
The role of the community college. Tell us, we have a great
absolutely, and I know Dr. Jeff Cox, because
yeah.
he used to be a school superintendent.
Yeah.
And we work together a lot. And in fact, I have talked to him as recently as last week. He's a great guy,
yeah.
and he is on the governing board of the 501c3 for the Northwest Risa. So
okay.
and there's a lot of good synergy with the community college here, on a simple level with some facilities and sharing spaces and so forth, but and actually he attends occasionally our our superintendent's council meetings, and really talks about the challenges of, it's not just K-12, it's K-14 and K-16 education, and how the cooperative efforts we do with middle colleges and early colleges that typically are housed with and supported by community colleges, how do they then become interfacing with the four-year institutions? In fact, that was a conversation we had just a week ago. I'm
so grateful that you have the time to come over here and in your busy schedule and to share. There's wonderful things happening here at Wilkes Communications. I mean, this is the significant community outreach here, and I want to opportunity I've had, and I want to thank Wilkes Communications and our River Street Production Group and 100.9, and I want you to end with the blessings because of your commitment to be an educator, and there's administrator and our most important asset, the child and his family and her community. So end with that,
Well, I'd like to think that all of us look at the blessings we have, and whether it's that to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yep.
We all need to give back, and part of that giving back for me has been with community. I mean, with families, with taxpayers, with maybe folks that sometimes nobody's listened to them. You get an opportunity to do some listening, and this maybe needs to be addressed. And how do you take it to a bigger level to see if those things be addressed? So. Clearly there are many rewards in that personally, that have been for me, and I have really appreciated the kind of those kind of gifts I've had from other people that have had that opportunity maybe to be listened to, and things that actually meet their needs and make them more successful, make their children more successful, make a business more successful, which has been just a rewarding life for me. So and fortunately I have a wife that understands that balance, and we work out well, and family and the whole thing, grandkids. It's been great. Wonderful
Dr.
life.
Don Martin is over just a couple miles away, is helping folks train teachers to teach and to do the great things. And how much you've enriched my life as we met 3 years ago down in Kernersville, and I always had admired you from afar. We're close now, and you're bringing a great dynamic to us here today on people doing good for others, and I just want you to know what a blessing it is to have you here.
Well, thanks for the invitation. Of course, I've gotten to know Gary and really have enjoyed that, and just realized he gives a lot back just to bring these shows to all the folks in this viewing area, because this is something he feels compelled to do, and it's not about money, it's about a gift.
You're a selfless contributor in countless ways. And I appreciate that.
So are you. Mutual admiration.
Good luck.
Thank
Come
you.
back again.
All
Thank
right.
you.